Hey, happy Friday. This week we got some brand new information about Apple's biometric tracking technologies, MicroOLED displays had a huge week, and crypto winter 2.0 is apparently here. Or is it 3.0 or 4.0? Well, anyway, who's counting? Welcome to the Friday Checkout. This video was sponsored by Nebula. Okay, this week we start the brief with news that the next Galaxy Unpacked event for foldables, like the Fold 5 and the Flip 5, will apparently happen in late July. That is pretty soon. Next, the chip of the Pixel 8, presumably called the Tensor G3, was leaked, and it will supposedly use ARM's last-gen CPU and GPU cores, like the Cortex X3 for example, while again being made by Samsung Foundry, although now on its 4LPP process. So again, it doesn't look like a bleeding-edge chip, but still a step up from last year. Also this week, Google's coding AI called AlphaDev discovered new sorting algorithms that perform 70% faster than algorithms that humans have spent decades optimizing. Apparently, the AI did a ton of assembly-level micro tweaks and optimizations to achieve these results. That's right, computers, at least in some cases, can now write significantly better code than humans, and to that I say, all hail to our robot overlords. Next, WhatsApp announced Channels, which seems to be a copy of Telegram channels, meaning that you can follow public accounts like companies or influencers who can now post to huge groups of people within WhatsApp, which is perfect for your local disinformation campaign. And Reddit announced that it will charge a ton of money for their API, which many Redditors hated so much that moderators created large-scale subreddit blackouts in protest. Then, Microsoft got fined $20 million for retaining children's data without their parents' consent, and if you remember, just last week we reported Amazon doing the exact same thing. This is a classic move. And of course, the week wouldn't be complete without all the big Apple announcements from WWDC and beyond. On the Mac side, we got 3 new machines in the form of the 15-inch MacBook Air, a new Mac Studio, and a new Mac Pro that finally uses Apple Silicon now as well, plus a new high-end chip in the form of the M2 Ultra. What I found most interesting is that the company actually actively pitched macOS as a legitimate gaming platform for the first time that I can remember, inviting legendary game developer Hideo Kojima and announcing a new game porting toolkit, which supposedly easily ports Windows DirectX games to Mac, among other things. Gaming computers are one of the last profitable niches for Windows device makers, so if Apple really gets serious about this, that could be a serious issue for many of them. We'll talk about the whole Apple lineup in detail and also about what Mark Zuckerberg thinks about his new competition in my podcast this week. We'll share all of our thoughts on why Apple just keeps getting away with stuff and more. This will be the season finale for the first season of the Friday Chill Out podcast, so go listen to that after this video on Nebula. Links are in the description. Anyway, talking about the Apple headset, I'm sure that you know all the basic details of it already, but in my first story this week, I actually wanted to talk about one detail that Apple conveniently did not announce at WWDC. So the device itself looks incredibly impressive on a technical level to me, and I actually can't wait to give it a try. But you know how Apple actually tracks your eyes to an insanely accurate degree using this headset? Well, it turns out that that is not just to unlock your headset and to select objects on a screen, and it turns out that Apple is probably tracking much more than just your eyes. According to Sterling Crispin, a developer who apparently worked on the headset for years and is on a bunch of Apple patents, Apple also at least explored using the headset to kind of read your mind. By inferring measurements like eye tracking, electrical activity in your brain, heartbeats and rhythms, muscle activity, blood density in the brain, blood pressure, skin conductance, and even what your pupil does, Apple is trying to read your emotions in real time. Apparently they learned that pupils, for example, react before you click on something because you expect something to happen after you click it. So this kind of feedback lets Apple adjust stuff in VR to your brain functions basically in real time, without the need to hook a cable, for example, into your brain. Even more wild to me is that Apple explored the headset doing tricks, like quickly flashing visuals or sounds to a user in ways that they may not perceive, and then measuring their reaction to those. You know, a bit of casual subliminal messaging. Nice. And this is just the stuff that the researcher was actually allowed to say without breaking his NDA, as he's only talking about stuff that is publicly available in patents right now, or in other public papers that he and others wrote about. And so while we don't know how much of this is actually built into the final headset, we do know that Apple actually worked on these things and filed the patents for them. And you know, maybe Apple are the good guys who, even if they have the tech, are not going to use it for anything shady. But even if that was the case, once Apple has the tech, others will copy them as well. And other companies like Meta are definitely not going to hold back on it. So the future is looking kind of weird. Okay, and my second story of the week is going to be about MicroOLED displays. These are a new type of display that is so niche still that last week when I talked about them, I got a comment saying that they don't exist. But I'm sorry to say, they do. So you might have heard by now that the Apple Vision Pro will be one of the first devices out there adopting this new display tech, and that it allows for next level clarity with more than 4K per eye, super high brightness, etc. These MicroOLED displays have to be so dense and so small that instead of being built on a glass substrate like traditional displays, their pixels get placed directly on a silicon wafer. The whole screen is basically a silicon chip. There's been a big race in the micro-OLED space for some years now, with Samsung, LG, China's BOE, and Sony all racing to reach scale, and Samsung has just bought what seems to be the market-leading startup called Imagine just last week for about $200 million. Apple, who's rumored to use a Sony panel, was not quite the first company to ship a headset with it, as other smaller device makers have already beaten them to that, but given that Apple is expected to sell their headset in the millions, not in the thousands, this means that the tech can finally slowly be made at real scale. These micro-OLED displays are apparently a true game changer for VR, so if indeed they can be mass manufactured, then maybe the industry has a bright future ahead of it after all, quite literally. Okay, and for my third story of the week, there's more trouble in crypto land, with the SEC suing Binance, the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the whole world, and Coinbase, the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the United States. Both companies are basically accused of not following US regulations that financial institutions must normally abide by, and my favorite piece of evidence in this whole case is Binance's chief compliance officer messaging a colleague saying that, quote, "We are operating a unlicensed securities exchange in the USA, bro." Nice, way to go. Binance seemed to know that it was actively doing illegal things, such as not separating its US finances from its international ones as was required, while the Coinbase situation looks to be a more complicated, drawn-out legal fight. That is, unless Coinbase, of course, just decides to move to the UAE. With FTX having already gone up in flames and the other two big exchanges being in active legal fights, this sure feels like a major shift for the space. Now, you know this super satisfying feeling of going on the internet and finding just the perfect video on the internet, you know, like a beautifully written video essay or something like that? Well, that happened to me 3 times this week, and each of those 3 times were actually over at Nebula. Nebula is kind of magical because it only hosts fantastic creators, so every video on the platform is basically a guaranteed gem. Whatever you watch is almost always a smash hit, and then those creators, in addition to their usual videos, also create a ton of originals that are only available on Nebula. I mean, just look at this incredible list of the most recent originals. Real Engineering has just launched Season 2 of his fantastic Battle for Britain series. Episode 2 of Wendover's new Logistics series just dropped on Nebula. Same for the incredibly fascinating real-time history original called Red Atoms, which is a deep dive into the Soviet nuclear programs. Then there is Neo's incredible Underexposure series that blows me away every time, and the list just goes on and on. And that list includes my own original called TechAltar, my podcast called The Friday Chill Out, and more. If you like smart online videos, then Nebula is that, but on steroids. And best of all, Nebula is actually owned and operated by us, the creators, and it is not funded by some shady ads or tracking or anything like that, but directly by your subscriptions. So your money actually goes towards helping us make better and more content for you. If you use my link, which you can find down in the description or on Seed, you can get a yearly subscription for just $30, which is a $20 discount versus just using a generic link to sign up. So check it out. I really hope you enjoy all the stuff that we put out on the platform, and I'll see you next Friday.